everyone, this is Bethany Winston from Kidding Around, and I'm here today with Bridget Watson from Safe Kids Upstate, and we're going to talk about some really important things today, and some of them may seem like things you think that you already know everything about, but after talking to Bridget, I can assure you that there's a lot of things that I've learned just from talking to her. And so we're going to talk about firework safety. We're going to talk about the heat, how to keep your kids safe, especially with cars. You know, we all read those horrible stories about people whose children get locked in cars and die this time of year. And it can happen to any one of us, even those of us that are really great parents. So we're just going to have some great tips for that. And then we're also just going to talk about travel safety and some general summer tips. So Bridget, start us out. Can you tell us a little bit about how to keep our kids safe around the 4th of July with fireworks?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We know that it's really popular in this area to have fireworks. I know it is in my neighborhood at least. Yes. But we're also very lucky in that Greenville and I think Simpsonville, and there's probably so many other cities I'm forgetting about, have like a citywide 4th of July celebration.
Right. And so they're mostly free too.
Yes, which is great. I think the one downtown is red, white, and blue, and it's free, and it's amazing. So that's not always the funnest suggestion, but from a safety standpoint, the number one suggestion is to always leave it to the professionals. So that just kind of makes things a lot easier on the parents too. You don't have to go buy fireworks. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You can just kind of pack everybody up and go. But if that's not your cup of tea and you actually want to do some fireworks yourself, our biggest thing is just making sure, of course, adult supervision, which is key. Right. So not letting the children or teens actually do the lighting themselves. We always recommend that it's always an adult that's going to light the fireworks. Okay. And making sure that the kids are very, very far away from wherever you are actually doing the lighting. They also recommend that you always have at least a gallon of water nearby. So just in case something happens, you never know if the grass nearby may be dry, or you might have a fire hazard somewhere. And sometimes we know that fireworks can have a mind of their own, so you don't really know where they're going to go. Right. So if there is a situation in which a fire is started, that's when they recommend to have a gallon of water nearby. And then I personally recommend to call your local fire department, which I know is always funny, but they have a fire marshal who's on staff, and you can always ask them, like, hey, how's the weather been lately? Do you suggest us doing this now? And they'll be very honest with you to let you know, like, hey, we're kind of going through a drought. This could be a serious situation. We recommend you not doing it. Or they'll tell you, you know, like, as long as you're doing things safe, like, it should be fine. And then, of course, just knowing your city ordinances. So knowing if it's even legal to fireworks in your area.
Now, where's a good place to find that information? Would you say calling your fire department would be the best way?
For fireworks? Yeah, you can call them for sure. The fire marshals are always awesome, and they're going to answer your questions for you. And then I can give you some information on where to find fire safety tips online too. Like I said, our Safe Kids website has tons of safety tips on different areas, and we actually do have one on fireworks. And I will say, because we were talking about it earlier and I almost forgot, sparklers. I think it's really interesting to know how hot sparklers can get.
So how hot do they get?
Yeah. So I didn't know this until I started working with Safe Kids, but they can get up to 1,200 degrees. So that is so hot. And a lot of times, you know, kids, they have shorter arms, so the distance for us as adults to hold them out is a lot different from a toddler or a small child holding them and the sparks kind of flying on them. So they actually recommend glow sticks for the little ones. That way you're not in a situation of getting burned from the sparklers.
And I think some of these things are good things as parents and talk about ahead of time as a family and just decide, because I know for me, sometimes you get in a situation and, you know, all the kids have sparklers or something, and like you've never discussed as a family, like what are our rules on sparklers? It's very difficult in the moment to make a decision. So these are good things to think about now before you go and do your celebrations, especially if you're going to other people's homes, so that you know what you're comfortable with and what your family rules are.
Yeah, or events. I think we were talking, sometimes you show up to events and they're handing them out and it puts you in a weird situation of, if you haven't had that conversation yet, of knowing what to do in those situations. And same things, we're going into summer, so there's weddings also, so it's not always just 4th of July, and a lot of times now weddings are doing sparklers. So
that's
it's good to talk
point.
about,
you know, because even then, you know, if you have a family rule against sparklers, you can say to your children ahead of time, just so you know, we don't do sparklers in our family. You know, and then at least they're mentally prepared.
Right, or our mom or dad's going to hold the sparklers, and you watch from a distance. But no, I think it's important. There's a lot of different types of injuries that can happen from burns. So I think just being, you know, either going to an event that's already kind of built for you is important, or just making sure that you do your research prior if you're going to shoot your own fireworks to make sure it's safe.
I was going to say, for those 4th of July events, we do have a full list on our website of all of these events. They start this weekend, so there are lots of great choices. And while you're not shooting off the fireworks yourself, you're going to have a better show. And there's also going to be lots of other fun things to do.
And they always have, like, I was going to say, they have like face paint and all this other fun stuff.
Spend your money on great food or something instead of on the fireworks.
And something that they don't mention on the fireworks safety tip, and I think because they're just very specific to the fireworks here, but we always mention, is that it's important to also have hearing protection for your little ones. When you're around them. That goes for any loud noises, but sometimes I think we forget, you know, to protect the little one's ears. So that's always something that's good to remember. And then always give a quick shout out to the dog families. It's always important to make sure that your dogs or cats are put away safely if you're going to do fireworks. Because there's been a lot of accidents that have happened with dogs being scared, running away. It could put you in a weird situation with your pet and your kids too, so you don't want to spook them. And you know,
that's a good thing to remember, especially this weekend and the next week.
For sure.
So we also wanted to talk to you today about how to keep our kids safe in the car, especially with as hot as it is this week, and it's going to be the rest of the summer. So can you give us some tips on that? Like, how do you recommend that parents make sure their kids are not left in a car unattended?
So heat stroke is something that's super important this time of year, and it's super scary because it honestly, like we were talking, it can happen to anybody. And it doesn't have to just, I think something that's really important for parents to know is it doesn't have to be just really hot outside for that to occur. We've had several deaths already in the United States, and I think last year, 2018, was the highest rate of death that we've had as a nation. I think there was 52 deaths, and South Carolina had several of those. But it doesn't have to be 90 degrees outside for it to be dangerous. One of the deaths that happened this year was 69 degrees was the recorded temperature.
So you wouldn't even think that's hot.
Right. And a lot of times there's a misconception that if I crack the windows, you know, there's going to be airflow and it's going to be okay. But you know, we don't recommend children to be left in the car at all, period. Even, like I said, in South Carolina, we can be reaching those deadly temperatures as early as February. So it's really important to have the heat stroke education before we even get into summer. But especially now, it is really dangerous, really fast for us. So the biggest things that we recommend, and there's a lot, is kids really love keys and they love playing with keys. So that's something that we recommend, having that conversation with your child. A lot of times kids are not dying from just being forgotten in a car. Unfortunately, it's happening with kids getting access to a car. So they've been playing with keys, they know how to access it, they go outside, they get themselves into the car, and then they end up locking themselves in. And sometimes parents and caregivers don't even know that they're there because, you know, they just kind of make their way out and get in the car and get locked in. And we've had some situations to where parents have well-intentioned going into a store really fast, and then the kid rolling the window up and then locking themselves in. So it's not just situations in which they might have forgotten them in the car. It can be kids actually gaining access and locking themselves in too.
And I love the point you make about talking to your kids about it, because I think sometimes we know, like, we're very careful at home, but we forget that when our kids do go with other people, sometimes those people don't have the same rules.
Right, yes. And something that's important, and I'll provide this information too, is that a child's body heats up 3 to 5 times faster than us as adults.
Wow.
So in situations where we may not be as hot, a child has already reached a dangerous point because their internal temperature raises much faster than us. So that's important even if you're not in a car. If you're just out and about, it's important to always be aware that their internal temperature is going to raise much higher and much faster than us as adults. So that's what makes the car a very dangerous location for them, because it can get to 104 very, very fast in a car. And that's about the temperature in which there can be like fatal consequences to a child being left in. It can usually take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes for your car to heat up that fast. Yeah.
And I know we'll share this in the comments, but there's a video on the Safe Kids Upstate website that actually shows how fast the car heats up, which is a great thing, not just to look at yourself, but if you have a family member who watches your children, you're having trouble convincing, this could be a good thing to send to them.
Oh yeah.
To show them why you wouldn't want your kids to be left alone in the car.
Yeah, and I was going to show you, we used to have these a lot more accessible, but I can help post where you can find these online if you want to purchase one for yourself. But it's just a static cling with a thermometer, and so you can put this on your car and it kind of tells you the internal temperature of your car.
Okay.
And what I think is interesting about this is I have one of these on my car, is that even when my car is in my garage, it's already in the 100 degrees. Because I think when I went out yesterday or one day this week, I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, it was probably like 110 in my car.
Wow.
And my car was parked in the shade in my garage. So I think it's really shocking when you realize like how hot your car can get and how fast it can get. So any kind of thing like this is important. Yeah.
So quick question, do you happen to know the laws regarding leaving children unattended in a car?
So there are laws in the United States. South Carolina doesn't have a specific one yet to my knowledge. I think there are several states that do have laws, but I don't think South Carolina has one specific yet. So what we do suggest, so if you're asking because you want to know what to do if you come across a child in the car, we always recommend to call 911 first. And then they will help guide you. So if you see a child unattended in a car, 100% call 911, and then they will help guide. Either they're going to come and take care of it themselves, or they usually will tell the person who's calling what they're able to do. It's part of, actually, that's a great question, it's part of our, what we call ACT, so how to avoid heat stroke in a car, and that's A is for avoid, so trying to help avoid the situation. So we know by research that a lot of times parents can forget the child in the car for many reasons, and that can be a change in routine, it can be a lack of sleep, it can be anything. Like we were saying earlier, it can happen to anybody. So we recommend to put some sort of reminder in the back seat.
Okay.
So like a purse or your phone or something that you know you have to get out of the car. So that's the number one thing we recommend. And then the C is to create reminders. So that's part of that as well. So a lot of times cars now, you don't have to use your key to start. So some people will put their keys in the back because they know they have to have their keys to get out. And then T is take action. So that would be the answer to that question. So if you see a child alone in the car, call 911. But unfortunately, South Carolina, to my knowledge, does not have a specific law yet.
So what if the car is running with the AC on and you see a child unattended?
Yeah, so I say that's up to the person if they feel like they're in distress, or they can always call. I mean, it's not. I don't feel like it's going to hurt anybody to call 911. if they feel like it's an unsafe situation. Yeah.
And I like the one point going back to, you know, the reminders in your car. I really like that because I think it's important, like you're saying, to realize that, you know, we hear these stories on the news that it could really happen to any one of us, you know, in a distracted moment or a moment where we're focused on something else. You know, you could forget your child, but not that you really forgot them, but just forget that you have not taken them out of the car seat. And so I love that idea of putting your keys or something back there because if you have a habit of always having your keys with you, you know you'll check that back.
Yeah, and a lot of car manufacturers are trying to help add safety features to cars, which I think are great. And there are actually some cars on the market, and I'm sure it's going to become more prevalent as this moves on, but there are some cars now that have reminders for you that when you open the door, it'll tell you to look in the back. So I think that's a big indication that it really can happen to anybody if the car companies are putting those reminders in for parents too.
So what are some signs that we can look for? Maybe not necessarily in a car, but with it just being hot, signs that we know that someone's having heat stroke.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's different signs. They can be flushed, they can have agitation, confusion, they can have, you know, they can be sleepy, sluggish. There's several different signs, and I'll attach that too so that families can look at it, because sometimes the signs can just resemble the same signs as being tired. You know, things that are more common that you may not think is a heat stroke. So I think it's important for parents to know, especially if they're definitely showing signs that they're just not acting the way that they usually do, especially with the agitation. I think that's important to know. Of course, there's the loss of consciousness, which is a very telltale sign, but it can also be rapid heart rate. So if you are noticing that the child's heart is beating really fast on top of all of these, it's always safe to call. You can always call your pediatrician nurse line. You can call just to, you know, it's always better to be safe than sorry, for sure, if you're worried. Because you're right, it can happen outside of a car. You know, it can just happen from a long day of play, you know, on the playground. So, yeah.
Now, do you have any tips for helping make sure your kids are not out in the heat too long? Like if you are going to the beach, let's say, or to the water park, is there like a certain number of hours you should take a break? Or?
Yeah. I don't know of the recommendation of certain hours. I can definitely research it because that's a great question. I would love to know that. But our biggest thing is hydration, and we do a lot with hydration. And actually next month's safety video, we're going to talk a lot about hydration, so it'll be great because we're going to focus a lot on playground safety, which is super important. But hydration is key for all of us, so children and adults. So if you can just make sure that you're keeping them well hydrated, it will really help them a lot in keeping them in the shade for sure.
That's a good tip. And I also wanted to mention, because this connects with it, that we have a whole video on water safety that we did that's in our video library. So if you're looking for more tips on how to keep your kids safe in the water, we do have a video that specifically addresses that.
We always love to refer back to water safety in the summer months, especially where we live. So definitely check that out for sure.
So did you also want to tell us something about traveling?
Yeah, so I'm obviously very passionate about my car seat, so I always want to bring it up because in the summertime, you know, we're traveling a lot more. Kids are out of school, so you're probably in the car with them a lot more than you are during the school year. And it's really important, one, if you're going on a trip, it's important to know the laws in the states that you're traveling to. Because every state has different child passenger safety laws. We in South Carolina are very lucky that we have one of the more stricter states. So we actually have pretty strict child passenger safety laws, which is great for us. But if you're traveling to another state and you're going to be there for a while, or even if you're just passing through, you know, it's always good to know the laws there, because if you were to get pulled over, say in Georgia, and their law is different, they can still cite you based on their state.
That's a really good one.
That's a good one to know. But then also just some safety tips to take into consideration before you go on those long trips. So they always recommend, you know, making sure that your car is in a safe way of traveling. So getting that typical maintenance done before you go on a long trip.
Yes.
But also making sure your car seat's installed safely. So you can always come to one of our inspection stations. It only takes about 30 minutes. But even if we have installed it for you and you have questions,
Okay.
Parents are more than welcome to come back. Or if you came to us maybe when your child was an infant and we installed your infant seat, but you might have questions about your convertible or anyone that you move to, like you can come to our stations as many times as you want as your child transitions. But it's just important to know. The biggest thing that I like to talk about, we always touch on infant safety a lot, but I think sometimes the bigger kids get a little left behind, but it is just as important for your bigger kids. So what we have been seeing a lot in the ER lately is injuries from children being moved too soon to the next step.
Yes.
So whether that be from a 5-point harness, which is this one, to belt positioner, or kids being moved from the booster to a seat belt too soon. So when it comes to the 5-point harness, the biggest thing that we want to make sure that parents take note of, on top of the installation and everything else, is this chest retainer clip. Okay. We often see them way too low, and sometimes kids get old enough to where they can start moving them around. So it's always good to talk to your kids about the importance of that, but also knowing just how important the chest clip is as a whole. So it is called the retainer clip because it helps retain them in the car seat. So you always want this retainer clip to be at the armpit level. So that's the same from when they're an infant all the way up to until they're almost going to be out of it. This helps the harness above stay in place so that during an accident it doesn't fall off and it doesn't create a dangerous situation. And then of course when you are you have a child that's at booster age, making sure that the seatbelt is properly fitted on them. So the recommendation is child should not be sitting with just the seatbelt until they reach at least 57 inches. So our law states 8 or 57 inches, which can cause some confusion. So you never know, every kid grows differently. So, your child might reach 4'9", which is 57 inches, at age 8. Someone else's child may not reach that until they're 11. So really, we just want parents to take note of how important the height is.
And was that height for just the shoulder, I mean just for the lap belt with a booster or without it?
Without anything. So because that's probably our number one question from parents is, when can my kid be without a safety seat at all? So the recommendation is 57 inches or 4'9". So it's pretty tall.
I mean, I know my 8-year-old's not that tall yet, poor kid.
And some of our co-workers, we joke that some of us, or not me, but some of them need booster seats like as adults because so I think it's important because it's the placement of the seatbelt that's important. And that's what we see in the ER is sometimes, unfortunately, the seatbelt can cause the injuries more than the crash can. Especially if it's hitting them in the wrong position. So that's why that's important. That's why we always bring that up. I know kids want to be in that seatbelt, especially if they have other friends that are already in their seatbelt. It's a tough conversation to have with them. But it's just showing them that it's just keeping them safe. Especially, we don't ever like to see kids in the ER, and we definitely don't want to see them being injured from the thing that's supposed to be protecting them. So,
I did not know that. I'm trying to think. There was something else I was thinking of asking you, but I have to just ask you after.
I know. I feel like we covered a lot, but
really
there's so many safety tips. And if anybody has any questions about things that we don't cover, just let us know, because we have all kinds of stuff online. We have some things about grilling safety. So we have other like small bits and pieces for summer safety that we can always provide if you need it.
And I just remember what I was going to say. I was just thinking while you were talking about the heat stroke. about also reminding people to put water in their car this time of year.
Yeah.
Keep a little extra, because like I know there's been times where we've gotten stuck in traffic or something.
Yeah.
And you know, if your car were to
Oh
break
my
down,
gosh, yeah.
you're on the heat this time of
Mhm.
year.
Yeah, that's
you know,
all.
You
that's,
may need water more than just one
and your
water
car
bottle.
might need water too. And that leads into another good topic, which is projectiles, which I don't think a lot of people think about.
Okay.
It's something that we talk about at our fitting station. When you are packing your car to go on these big trips, just be aware that anything loose and heavy in your car in an accident will become a projectile. So you want to make sure you really tie stuff down,
Okay.
or keep them secure, or keep the really heavy stuff in the back, just so that if you are in an accident, that those items don't become things that cause injuries in your car, because our cell phones can be very heavy in an accident.
Really?
If you do the weight, if you do the speed of a cell phone in an accident, it can be a very, very heavy force in an accident. So that's something that I have to remind ourselves too, because I'm the type of person that I love to pack as much as I can in my car for trips, but you know, it's always good to make sure that you keep it tied down and safe. Yeah.
That's a really good tip.
Yeah.
Well, if you all have any questions, you're welcome to continue putting them in the comments. We'll get an answer for you. Also link some of these resources.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else, Bridget, that we need to cover today, or did we cover it all?
I think we covered a lot. Yeah, I was gonna say there's so much stuff in the summer time. So yeah, if you have any questions, just let us know. We're always here to answer. We can always answer about sports and hydration and anything like that. So if there's any random summer safety tips that you have questions about, definitely let us know.
Thank you. Well, you all be safe this summer.